So last night was kind of interesting. Um, I fell asleep probably about midnight, 12:30 maybe. And all night long, I had these words in my mind and they were just like playing on a loop. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. You know, sometimes it happens like you'll just wake up with a song playing in your head and you don't really know why. But all night long, I had these words just playing over and over in my head, and it was joyful anticipation and rest. I woke up about 5:30 this morning and I was just started to say it out loud because it was just playing in my head. I was like joyful anticipation and rest. And I got out my journal and wrote it down and put the date on it, and because I like to document these things, you know, when you just wake up with something in your head and you're not really sure why, it's kind of interesting to, write it down and maybe a month or two down the road see what's going on, go back and read it and see if it had any meaning or value. But I really do think this did have some value. So I got up and I made some coffee and I was just like joyful anticipation and rest. And I just kept saying it out loud. And then I looked down, I've got two dogs. They're half dachshund, half chihuahua, so they're chiweenies, they're called. And I've got one big fat one and one small little one. They're mother and daughter. And we rescued them off the side of the road several years ago. And they've just been the best dogs ever. I mean, they're just so sweet and nice. And so I'm walking around making coffee and I'm like joyful anticipation and rest. And I look down at my two dogs and they're just laying on their beds. They've got their blankets over them. And they just look so snuggly and just happy and content. And so I'm looking at them and I'm like, that's joyful anticipation and rest. Because when I got up and walked over towards their beds, they kind of started to wake up and you could tell they were just joyfully anticipating what I was going to do next. Was I going to take them on a walk? Was I going to feed them? Were we going to play? We're going to go outside. And they just had this look of joyful anticipation, and you could tell they were just excited. And they're like that. Like if I'll leave them in the backyard and go run some errands or whatever, when I come back, they're just jumping up and down at the fence, just, tongues hanging out, tails wagging. They're just joyfully anticipating me coming home or me coming to get them and play with them. But these two dogs, and I think this is like, most inside dogs, which they are, tend to lay around a lot. And they just kind of lay around at complete rest. And I just started thinking, like, that's kind of the goal, right? Like, of enlightenment. You might not really think about dogs and spiritual enlightenment as similar things, but I'm starting to think they're actually one and the same. And I'm starting to think that God gave us the examples of dogs here on this earth so that we could use that as a visual, I don't know, like object lesson, kind of to remind us of who we are and what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be at rest and just joyfully anticipating the day. I mean, you can read all kinds of like manifestation books, and that's what they tell you, like be content, but you're joyfully anticipating the manifestation of your desires, you know? And so I'm looking at these dogs and I'm like, joyful anticipation and rest. These dogs are not worried. They know I'm going to take care of them. They know I'm going to feed them. They know we're going to have fun. They're going to go on walks. They don't worry. They're not afraid. And so they're just at rest. And they spend a lot of their time just laying around on their big comfy beds and just eating whenever I feed them and just at complete peace and rest. Now, I know there's always exceptions when it comes to things like this. Some dogs are super hyper. Some dogs may have been abused or whatever, and so they have a different temperament, but you get what I'm saying. And it's like, I started thinking about enlightenment, and that's really the goal, right? Like, to reach a stage of spiritual awakening to where you're just at rest or blissed out, as Sadhguru would say. And so I started thinking about enlightenment. I'm looking at these two dogs, and then I'm thinking, this is what Jesus said in the Bible too. You see, that Jesus's way of enlightenment was become like little children and enter the kingdom of heaven. That's enlightenment according to the Bible, becoming like a little child. Well, what is that? Well, if you're a little child, and like I said, there's always exceptions to this, but as a general rule, you know your parents are going to take care of you. You know you're going to have food. You know you're going to have clothes to wear. And really, as a little kid, you're just like, how can we have fun today? What's today got in store for us, you know? And they're just kind of at rest. They don't really have a lot of worries. They're not reasoning things out in their minds. They're just like, let's go. It's a new day. Let's what are we going to do today? What's for breakfast, you know? But we as adults, you know, we wake up and then a lot of us start worrying right away. Like, oh, I got to get this done. I got to get that done. Oh, crap, I forgot to do this yesterday. And then emails and text messages and phone calls and social media and just, But you know, Jesus was like, unless you become like one of these little children, you're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven. And then he went on to say the kingdom of heaven is made up of like little children. And he talks about wanting us to have faith like a child. And he says in the book of Matthew, you know, why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? And he says, take no thought for your life. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about if you're going to have food to eat or clothes to wear. And he's like, consider the birds. They don't work at a job. They're not stressed out. They're not worried about being the best bird. And he's like, your heavenly Father takes care of them. And then he says, aren't you worth more than birds? And if your heavenly Father takes care of all the birds, how much more is he going to take care of you? But we forget that because of our reasoning mind. We think it's all about how much effort we can put in. But when you read about enlightened beings, especially if you study like Ram Dass and his guru Maharaji, or, you know, just any of these enlightened masters, the Buddha, you know, they are just kind of at rest. You know, you hear stories of them, you know, just sitting up in a cave, meditating. They have everything they need. The universe is just providing for them. And so, of course, they're just in a state of rest. And they're just like joyfully anticipating what's next. And that's really the goal. That's where we need to be to have a successful, happy life. Is number one, to be at rest. And number two, to be joyfully anticipating the good things God's got in store for us. So I know it's kind of funny to think about like comparing enlightenment to dogs. But just think about it for a little bit. Think about the things we've just been talking about. A dog is not worried. Like I said, there's always exceptions, but as a rule, dogs don't worry. They're not like in a hurry. They're just joyfully anticipating what you're going to put in their food bowl. Is it going to be a can of food? Is it going to be some lunch meat? Is it going to be some hot dogs? You know, whatever. My dogs eat everything. But they get excited, you know, and they're just excited about life, and they're loyal, and they're happy to be around you, and they're just spend most of their day just at complete rest. And this is what we're supposed to do. Now, it doesn't mean you just lay around all day. Of course, you're going to do your work and the things that you need to do, but you're going to do it from a state of just rest, not from a state of worry. Like, Oh my God, I've got to go to work and do this so I can pay the bills. No. God is our source. God is our supply. I was reading Florence Scovel Shinn. I was reading her book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. And she has a great affirmation in there. She says, God is my supply. Big, happy financial surprises now come to me under grace in perfect ways. See, that's that joyful anticipation. If you're joyfully anticipating big, happy financial surprises coming your way under grace in perfect ways, what a way to live. That's great. That's the goal. So I'm telling you, you can awaken, you can become fully enlightened by just being like a dog. I'm serious. You can do lots of things to become enlightened or spiritually awakened, whatever you've self-realized, whatever you want to call it. You can meditate, which I'm a big supporter of. I love meditation. And you can do that for years, and you can study ancient spiritual books and have a spiritual practice like Buddhism or meditation or whatever your practice may be. And maybe after years and years and maybe even lifetimes of doing that, you reach a state of complete enlightenment. But let's think about what's the goal of enlightenment. What would it feel like to be enlightened? Probably like what a happy little dog feels like. Just at complete rest, joyfully anticipating life. That's the goal. So we can get there quicker than spending year after year after year. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have a spiritual practice. You should. It's healthy. It's good for you. But as far as enlightenment goes, think about how dogs are. They trust that they're going to have food. They trust that they're going to have a fun day. So much so that they can just rest all day long and joyfully anticipate when you come home. Joyfully anticipate dinner time or playtime or going on a walk. And they're just at rest. That's what enlightenment is. And you can look at this from another angle too. It's kind of interesting. Of course, everybody knows this. This isn't groundbreaking, and maybe it's kind of silly, but the word dog, spelled backwards, is God. And wouldn't that be just like the universe to put an obvious example right in front of us of like a dog and how we're actually supposed to be? That's kind of the goal. The goal in life is to just kind of be at rest and joyfully anticipate life, knowing, trusting that our Heavenly Father has got it all taken care of, that we don't have to worry, we don't have to fear. All we have to do is receive from Him. So you've got the word dog, spelled backwards as God, and then you think, that's kind of ironic because the way a dog is backwards to the American way of life. It's the opposite of rest. It's backwards. It's, oh, we gotta do all this. We gotta work super hard. We gotta spend all our time hustling and grinding, and then maybe we'll achieve that state of rest and happiness. But what if we just look at a dog and look at the backwards spelling of it as God and realize, of course, the way a dog acts is backwards to the way the world wants us to act as human beings. But the Bible is filled with stories of Jesus comparing animals to how we're supposed to act and be. You can look through the book of Job. He talks about all these animals and how he made Job just like the animals. And they're strong and they're powerful, but yet they're at rest and at peace, and they're not worried and they're not afraid. That, my friends, is enlightenment. So just think about it. Let's be at rest from here on out. Let's trust that God has got our back, and much more than that, He supplies all of our needs, and we don't have to worry or fear. Jesus says, don't worry about your life. Don't worry about tomorrow. Your Heavenly Father knows what you have need of. Just have faith like a child. That's the goal. And we can do that right now. You can become enlightened right now by becoming like a dog. Be at rest and joyfully anticipate life. I'll see you in the next video. Hope you got some value out of this. It's important. I know it's kind of silly. Enlightenment is a dog, but I think it's true. Give it a shot. We'll see you next time.